You think you understand the Holocaust because you've seen the numbers. 6 million Jews murdered, millions more Romani, disabled people, political prisoners, LGBTQ individuals systematically exterminated. But here's what they don't teach you in those memorial museums. The Holocaust didn't begin with gas chambers, it began with paperwork, forms, requisition orders, procurement contracts. A bureaucratic machine so vast, so meticulously organized, that it transformed an entire nation into accomplices without most of them ever pulling a trigger. And if you think you're different, if you believe you'd have resisted, you need to understand exactly how that machine worked, because the infrastructure of genocide looks nothing like what you imagine. Listen carefully. The first victims weren't killed in camps, they were killed in hospitals. On September 1st, 1939, the same day Germany invaded Poland, Hitler signed a secret decree authorizing physicians to grant a mercy death to patients deemed incurable. This wasn't presented as murder. It was framed as compassionate medical practice, supported by cost-benefit analyses showing how much money the state could save by eliminating useless eaters. Doctors didn't resist, they volunteered. They formed committees. They created evaluation forms with checkboxes determining who lived and who died. Between 1939 and 1941, over 70,000 disabled children and adults were killed in what became known as Aktion T4, not by soldiers, but by medical professionals who genuinely believed they were improving society through scientific management of resources. Read that again. 70,000 people murdered by doctors who saw themselves as rational administrators solving a logistical problem. Here's where it gets worse. The program required infrastructure killing centers, cremation facilities, transportation networks, death certificates that listed false causes of death. Someone had to build the gas chambers. Someone had to manufacture the carbon monoxide canisters. Someone had to design the ventilation systems. Someone had to train the staff. Every single step required procurement orders, budget approvals, construction contracts, personnel assignments, and all of it was documented. The Nazis were meticulous record keepers. They created paper trails for genocide because they believed what they were doing was legal, rational, and administratively necessary. When families complained about their relatives dying in these facilities, the state responded with bureaucratic efficiency form letters expressing sympathy, itemized bills for cremation costs, and threats of legal action if they continued making accusations. This is what the machinery of persecution looks like. It doesn't announce itself as evil. It presents itself as order, as efficiency, as necessary administration. Now trace how that machinery expanded. By 1941, the T4 program had perfected the industrial process of mass killing. Then it stopped, not because of moral awakening, but because the public had started noticing too many deaths among German citizens. So the infrastructure was repurposed. The personnel were transferred. The gas chambers were dismantled and shipped east. And the same doctors, the same engineers, the same bureaucrats who had killed 70,000 disabled Germans became the architects of the final solution. They didn't need new training. They already knew how to process human beings like inventory. They'd been practicing on their own citizens for 2 years. But here's the part that should terrify you. Most of the killing infrastructure wasn't built by the SS. It was built through ordinary government procurement processes. The Topf and Sons company manufactured cremation ovens. They bid on contracts. They competed with other firms for efficiency ratings. Their engineers visited Auschwitz to troubleshoot technical problems with body disposal rates, the same way contractors visit construction sites. They invoiced the government. They paid taxes on their profits. IG Farben, one of Germany's largest chemical companies, supplied Zyklon B gas. They didn't invent it for genocide. It was already used as a pesticide. They just increased production to meet growing demand from concentration camp administrators who submitted standard requisition forms. The German National Railway, the Reichsbahn, transported millions of people to death camps using regular scheduling systems. They charged per kilometer. They offered group discounts. Bureaucrats in regional offices coordinated timetables to ensure trains ran efficiently. None of this required special authorization. It was processed through normal administrative channels. Understand the machinery. If you've been told the Holocaust was carried out by a small group of fanatics, you've been lied to. The killing required hundreds of thousands of people performing ordinary administrative tasks, filing paperwork, approving budgets, processing invoices, scheduling trains, maintaining equipment, managing personnel. And the vast majority of them never saw a gas chamber. They just did their jobs. They followed procedures. They met quotas. When the war ended and they were asked how they could have participated, their answer was always the same. I was just following orders. I was just doing my job. I didn't know what was happening. But here's what the records prove. They did know. Not every detail, perhaps, but enough. The euphemisms were transparent. Special treatment. Resettlement to the east. Final solution. Railway officials knew the trains they scheduled were one way. They knew passengers didn't need return tickets. Chemical suppliers knew that the volumes of Zyklon B being ordered far exceeded any legitimate pest control application. Construction firms knew the ovens they built were designed to process bodies at industrial scale. The paper trail shows constant communication between concentration camp administrators and suppliers discussing capacity problems, efficiency improvements, cost reductions. These weren't military secrets. They were routine business transactions conducted through official channels, with standard contracts and invoice payments. Read the procurement records carefully. Notice the language. Auschwitz administrators didn't order equipment for mass murder. They ordered materials for special installations. Crematoria weren't called death factories. They were listed as corpse disposal facilities. The bureaucratic language created distance. It allowed people to participate without confronting what they were actually doing. A clerk processing a requisition form for construction materials didn't have to think about children being gassed. An accountant approving payment for cremation ovens didn't have to imagine the smell of burning flesh. The paperwork transformed genocide into an administrative procedure, and that transformation was deliberate. It allowed ordinary people to commit extraordinary evil while maintaining the psychological fiction that they were just civil servants doing necessary work. This is the part historians struggle to convey. We show you the camps. We show you the photographs of emaciated prisoners and mass graves. We show you the horror, but we fail to show you the banality that made the horror possible. Because the truth is uncomfortable, the Holocaust succeeded because it was organized like any other large-scale government program. It had budgets, it had departments, it had performance metrics. It had career advancement opportunities for ambitious bureaucrats who processed mass murder with the same diligence they brought to any other administrative task. Consider Adolf Eichmann. After the war, he lived in Argentina for years before Israeli agents captured him in 1960. During his trial in Jerusalem, observers expected to see a monster. Instead, they saw a middle-aged man who spoke in bureaucratic cliches about logistics, efficiency, and following regulations. Hannah Arendt, covering the trial, coined the phrase "the banality of evil" to describe what she witnessed. Not a sadistic fanatic, but a mediocre bureaucrat who had coordinated the transportation of millions to death camps using the same administrative skills he might have applied to any other large-scale transportation project. Eichmann genuinely believed he had done nothing wrong. He had followed orders. He had worked within the system. He had been efficient. The fact that his efficiency resulted in genocide didn't register as moral failure to him. It registered as successful program management. Now track the silence. After the war, most of the bureaucrats who administered the Holocaust were never prosecuted. The Nuremberg trials focused on high-level leadership and camp personnel, the visible perpetrators. But the thousands of clerks, accountants, engineers, railway officials, chemical suppliers, construction contractors who made the machinery run, they returned to normal life. They kept their jobs. Many resumed successful careers in post-war Germany. The companies that supplied the camps, IG Farben, Topf and Sons, Dehomag, IBM's German subsidiary that provided the punch card systems used to track prisoners, faced minimal consequences. Some were briefly dissolved and then reconstituted under new names. Their executives paid fines. And then everyone moved on. Why? Because prosecuting the entire administrative apparatus would have meant confronting an unbearable truth that genocide doesn't require fanatics. It requires clerks. It requires middle managers. It requires people who show up to work, process paperwork, solve logistical problems, and go home to their families without thinking too hard about the consequences of their efficiency. And if that's true, if ordinary administrative competence can produce industrial-scale murder, then the line between civilization and atrocity is far thinner than anyone wants to admit. If you're watching this, you need to subscribe to Myth Busting. Because we're not just correcting historical misconceptions, we're dismantling the narratives that let people sleep at night while participating in systems they refuse to examine. The evidence is overwhelming. We have the procurement records, we have the invoices, we have the personnel files showing promotions based on efficiency in processing deportations. We have internal memos discussing technical problems with body disposal as casually as engineers might discuss drainage issues in a construction project. We have testimony from survivors describing the mundane cruelty of administrators who processed them, like inventory counted, catalogued, assigned numbers, stripped of identity through bureaucratic procedures before they ever reached the gas chambers. And we have the post-war silence, the deliberate erasure of participation by thousands of people who returned to normal life and never spoke about what they'd done. That silence itself is testimony. It reveals the unstated agreement that allows societies to move forward after atrocity. We focus on the monsters so we don't have to confront the bureaucrats. We talk about Hitler and Himmler and Mengele so we don't have to talk about the clerks who scheduled the trains, the accountants who balanced the budgets, the engineers who optimized the killing process, the lawyers who drafted the regulations that made it all legal. Because confronting the bureaucrats means confronting something terrifying, that most historical evil isn't committed by people who set out to do evil. It's committed by people who prioritize procedure over morality, efficiency over ethics, career advancement over courage. The Holocaust wasn't an aberration. It was an administrative achievement. It demonstrated what becomes possible when bureaucratic rationality operates without moral restraint. When systems designed to organize society efficiently are applied to the problem of eliminating categories of human beings deemed inconvenient, expensive, or ideologically undesirable. And the truly horrifying part is how little has changed. We've built more sophisticated bureaucracies. We've created more distance between decision makers and consequences. We've developed more euphemistic language to describe violence. The machinery is still there. It's just waiting for the right combination of crisis, scapegoating, and administrative efficiency to activate it again. So when you see images from the Holocaust, don't just see the camps. See the procurement chains that supplied them. See the administrative systems that organized them. See the thousands of ordinary people who participated through paperwork and never questioned what they were enabling. Because the real lesson of the Holocaust isn't that evil people do evil things. It's that ordinary systems, operated by ordinary people following ordinary procedures, can produce unimaginable horror when nobody asks where the trains are going. And if you think you'd be different, if you believe you'd have resisted while your neighbors processed genocide through standard administrative channels, ask yourself this: what systems are you participating in right now that you refuse to examine too closely? What paperwork are you filing without asking what it enables? What procedures are you following because it's easier than questioning authority? The machinery of persecution doesn't announce itself. It just hires competent people, gives them tasks that seem reasonable in isolation, and relies on everyone being too busy, too afraid, or too invested in their careers to connect the dots. History's worst predator wasn't a person, it was a system, and systems don't die, they just wait. Drop a comment below and tell me what uncomfortable historical truth you think needs to be examined next, because the stories we're not supposed to question are usually the ones that matter most.